From KGW News, this is Straight Talk with Laurel Porter.
Hello and welcome to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. It has been almost 2 weeks now since Donald Trump was elected to another term as President of the United States. Not only did Mr. Trump surpass the number of electoral votes needed to win the presidency, he also won the popular vote, which hasn't happened for a Republican presidential candidate since George W. Bush was re-elected in 2004. It was a sweeping victory. Trump won in all 7 of the hard-fought battleground states and made gains in nearly all demographics. In addition, the GOP will hold all the levers of power, not only the White House, but also winning majority control of the Senate and retaining a narrow majority in the House as well. 5 of Oregon's 6 congressional members in the House are Democrats. And in the Senate, both Senators Wyden and Merkley are also Democrats. Their party's been in the majority in the Senate since 2020. That will change in January. What does that mean for Democrats, for Oregon, and the future of the nation? Here to wrestle with those questions and more, I'm pleased to welcome Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley. Welcome back to Straight Talk. So nice to have you here.
Thank you so much. It's so good to be with you.
Well, I know you worked really hard to try to get Harris and Walz elected, along with other Democrats. What was your reaction when it became clear to you that Donald Trump was going to win another term as President of the United States?
My first reaction was the word brutal. It just felt like a real blow. The things that he did in his first term I thought were bad for America, from child separation to tax breaks for the richest people. And I didn't want to see him coming back in again. But America spoke.
You worked hard also to try to help Democrats hold on to the Senate. In the end, that didn't work. Republicans will now have control 53 to 47 in January. Senator Wyden, Oregon senior senator, is chairman of the Finance Committee. You hold a key role on the all-important Appropriations Committee as chair of the Subcommittee on Interior, Environment, and Related Agencies, and chair of the Subcommittee on Chemical Safety and Waste Management, among other things. What does a Republican majority now mean for you, for Senator Wyden, and for Oregon?
Well, a lot of the thing I did on environment was to really highlight the challenge of chemicals, toxic chemicals in the environment, plastics, and climate change issues. I obviously won't be able to highlight those in the same way, bring in the same experts to explore those topics. But in terms of bills, those bills couldn't get through the House of Representatives last time because the Republicans controlled the House then. The place, you referred to the Spending Committee, the Appropriations Committee. Well, Lisa Murkowski of Alaska and I are the co-chairs. We work very closely together. So even though I was the chair.
She's a Republican.
She's a Republican. She was the ranking member. Our states both have a lot of the same forest issues and BLM, Bureau of Land Management issues, grazing issues. So we work really well together, and I think we'll continue to do so.
How about the new Senate leader who was elected this week, Senator John Thune from South Dakota? What kind of leader do you think he'll be?
I really enjoy working with John. We've had a comfortable relationship since since he first came, and then I came, and the part because I had relatives in South Dakota, I got him to call my sister-in-law just out of nowhere to say hello to her. It's been very comfortable talking to him, and we've had conversations about how the Senate works. I'm hoping that there are really 3 areas that we may be able to get bipartisan support to make the Senate work better: on nominations, on the ability to offer amendments, and on the ability to get appropriation bills to the floor. So I'll be carrying on those conversations.
Well, let's talk about some of the cabinet nominations from President Trump. We should say that we're taping this on Friday morning, and there's been a flurry of cabinet nominations in the last days, so anything could happen after we tape before this goes on the air. But let me just name a few of them. Matt Gaetz as Attorney General, Tulsi Gabbard, Director of National Intelligence, Pete Hegseth, Defense Secretary, he's the Fox News host. Also, RFK Jr. now is the Health and Human Services Secretary. What do you think of these cabinet nominations?
Well, the Tulsi Gabbard and Robert F. Kennedy and certainly Matt Gaetz, most of all, terribly unsuited to those roles. Matt Gaetz is someone who was going to have a file released by the House Ethics Committee this last week that would have laid out a whole series of personal problems that he had in terms of inappropriate interaction with young women to potential criminal actions. And by resigning from the House of Representatives one day before, he avoided that file being released. But there are senators on both sides of the aisle now saying that has to be released. He has to go through a regular vetting. So it's no guarantee that he'll get through, or some of these other individuals. But there are some other folks that I was glad to hear. Marco Rubio, I've worked very closely with.
Secretary of State.
Yes. Worked very closely with him on human rights issues involving Hong Kong, Taiwan, and Muslims in China who are treated as basically they're slave labor. And so he's going to bring, I may disagree with him on other parts of the world. I'm not saying I'll vote for him yet. I want to hear about other parts of the world, but I do think he's a appropriate experience and knowledge.
What do you think about RFK Jr. as health secretary?
Well, RFK has some really crazy ideas on health that I think will be very discouraging to many of the medical community around America, many of the nutrition community around America. And I'm hoping that the nomination processes will be explored fully, and maybe we'll get somebody maybe nominated more suitable.
Well, it sounds like you're expecting a nomination process, but what about the possibility, we keep hearing about recess appointments. Do you think the new leader will go for recess appointments, which means that you would be recessed, they work around the fundamental role, one of the fundamental roles of the Senate, and avoid a confirmation process? And if not, then I've been hearing that the president could also adjourn the Congress on his own so that he could avoid the nomination process. Are you concerned that could happen?
Well, I am concerned, but there are a lot of Republican senators that have already said there needs to be an appropriate vetting process, and therefore they would oppose such a recess. I mean, the essential check and balance in our Constitution was that the president's nominees would have to be found suitable by the Senate. But because at that time, though, the Senate might not be in session for 6 months at a time, there was this special provision for a very lengthy recess. You could, in fact, have a recess appointment. But the Supreme Court a few years ago defined that as 10 days. So the idea that Team Trump has put out is, hey, House and Senate just agree to shut down for 10 days, then we'll meet that standard, and then in one simple document, we can put a couple hundred people into position. I think that would be a huge failure to abide by the core vision and principles of our Constitution.
Let me ask you, I know you've probably thought a lot about this, and there's been a lot of conjecture now. What do you think went wrong for the Democrats? Why didn't Harris and Walz's message land with more Americans to win?
Well, one, Trump concentrated on immigration and inflation, and those were both issues of significant concern to Americans. Meanwhile, Democrats had talked about a number of kitchen table issues, but had not delivered on child care, on the rising cost of housing, on negotiating all of the drugs so we don't have to pay more than Canadians for drugs, things that people were coming to my town halls and saying, this bothers me. There's other things we did make progress on. And in fact, we did get a few drugs negotiated for Medicare, but not all drugs for all Americans. We made a number of bills were passed regarding fentanyl, which is a hugely devilish issue that people came to my town halls about. What they didn't come to my town halls about in general was to talk about the broad issues of democracy, which was a big piece of our presidential campaign. Those are incredibly important, but that wasn't hitting people in the gut. Inflation in all these areas were hitting them, and often the bills that we try to do in those areas were actually blocked by the Republicans. But you know, if you're in charge of the Senate, you're expected to deliver, and we didn't.
You supported and endorsed Bernie Sanders for the Democratic nomination in 2016 over Hillary Clinton. So I want to ask you about something Bernie Sanders said after Trump's recent win. He said in a social media post, "It should come as no great surprise that a Democratic Party which has abandoned working class people would find that the working class has abandoned them. First it was the white working class, and now it is Latino and black workers as well. While the Democratic leadership defends the status quo, the American people are angry and want change, and they're right," unquote. Do you agree with Senator Sanders?
Well, I don't agree with him here in Oregon. I feel like Democrats were reelected across the board because they have been tackling the issues of working Americans. And nationally, the things that we tried to do in the Senate for those issues, we didn't get done because of the Republican veto, called the filibuster, but really just a veto of getting bills to the floor. But my argument has been we had the responsibility to rectify that. We had the responsibility to modify the Senate so that the minority has a voice but not a veto, and we didn't do it, so we're held accountable. But I can tell you, if you want to see what Trump's standing for, watch that tax bill come out. And that tax bill is going to raid the national treasury. It's going to deliver 80-90% of the benefit to the richest Americans and biggest corporations. That's what he did 8 years ago, and that's what he's going to do again. That's someone fighting for the elite. That's someone fighting for the powerful, not the people. So the Democrats fighting on behalf of the people didn't deliver, and that's on us.
How did the Democrats get the working class back, gain that trust back, and speak to the people of the things that they care about?
We pass the bills. When we have the majority, we pass the bills to get it done on the issues people are mobilized about. I mean, think about this. The dream of home ownership is dying in America. It has been the biggest source of wealth for middle-class America has been home equity. And then, after you don't have to keep facing those rising rents. But now we've got hedge funds buying up all the single-family homes in America, or good in some markets.
And I know you're trying to get a bill passed that would stop that from happening.
And it's exactly the type of bill that you cannot call up an amendment now in the Senate without 100 senators agreeing. And you can't get a bill to the floor without the Republicans agreeing. And that's what I'm talking about. The Senate is not working for the people, and the Democrats had a responsibility to make it work, and they didn't get it done.
We're going to talk a little bit more about the filibuster in our next segment, but I want to ask you right now about immigration. I know that's something you're passionate about. Mr. Trump has named a border czar, Thomas Homan, who previously served as acting head of Immigration and Custom Enforcement, ICE, and was a proponent of Donald Trump's zero-tolerance policy separating children and families at the border. He'll be overseeing what happens at the border along with the new White House Deputy Chief of Staff, Stephen Miller. You wrote a book released in 2019. You and I talked a lot about that back then, called America is Better Than This, Donald Trump's War Against Migrant Families. What do you expect to see from Trump in the second term when it comes to immigration and the border?
Well, he has said that he'll replicate child separation, that he's tempted to do that. I mean, that was 4,000 children ripped out of their family, no records kept about who their parents were, so incredibly hard to rejoin them. And it was done as a deliberate effort to hurt the children, to discourage immigration. That is not America. And when I first heard about that, and when I heard Jeff Sessions, the then Attorney General, talking about doing that, I said to my team, that is impossible. Nobody on either side of the aisle would deliberately harm children, even for the purpose of discouraging immigration. And my team said, well, you could go down to the border and see, which is how I became the first member of Congress to discover the child separation, to walk in that warehouse, to see the children herded into cages. And he has said he wants to go that direction again. When Trump came into office, he did something that was exactly aggravated the challenge. He shut down the program that kept essentially contact with everyone so they would show up for their hearings. And then he shut down the asylum hearings so that this period, if you called for asylum, you didn't get a hearing in a timely fashion. Now it's up to about 6 years. Democrats should have gotten that fixed, and we didn't.
Well, let me ask you, because President Trump, elect, has campaigned for a year about immigration, about mass deportation, and he won with the majority of the votes. Isn't that a message from voters that they want something done about immigration, people coming into this country illegally, and to secure the border?
Well, it is a message about that. And if you think back to a few months ago, we spent an enormous amount of time negotiating a bipartisan immigration bill in the Senate. And we were ready to pass it. We had a supermajority to pass it. It took on all aspects of the security at the border and having a lot more individuals, a lot more technology, a lot more case management efforts, a lot more asylum hearings on a timely basis, all of that, supported by some of the most conservative members of the U.S. Senate. And then Trump in the campaign said, don't pass that bill. I don't want to fix the border. I want it to be a raw wound that I can campaign on. Certainly, this is something Kamala pointed out repeatedly in the debates, that the reason that problem existed at that level was because Trump stopped the bill to fix it. But on the other hand, that was year 4. That was year 4 of the Biden administration.
Need to be done sooner.
We needed that bill in year 1.
Right. Let me ask you about mass deportation. He's promised that too. What is that going to mean for Oregon, that is a strong sanctuary state, that has strong sanctuary laws?
Well, there's a lot of concern that states like Oregon and Illinois will be especially targeted by the
federal funds being withheld.
It could be federal funds at all, or grants not being awarded in all kinds of other categories. Just like so, there's a lot of concern about. Also, we have a lot of immigrants from Latin American states, so Mexico and Central America, and those are states that it's easier to deport to because those governments have been more cooperative. So there's a real concern that there'll be a special attack here on our immigrants. And of course, this is like children going to school, worried that they'll come home and the house will be empty. Employers worried that their workers won't show up to work the next day. Certainly,
it's a big part of the workforce, agriculture,
yes,
construction.
A big part of the workforce. When I am doing my town halls throughout Oregon, I hear from the fast food industry, I hear from the agricultural industry that they need more workers. They have a shortage of workers now. So there is a solution of having the rule of law at the border, increasing legal immigration, proceeding to have those who came as children were brought here as children have a path to citizenship. There is a win-win for America, and that is what we need to achieve.
Senator Merkley, it's time for us to take a break. When we come back, we will talk about the filibuster, something Senator Merkley has wanted to get rid of, but could it be a tool for Democrats to use to stand in the way of President-elect Trump's agenda? We'll talk about that and more when we come back. Welcome back to Straight Talk. I'm Laurel Porter. We are talking with Oregon Senator Jeff Merkley about the way forward for Democrats after their stinging loss to Donald Trump and the Republican Party. Thanks again for being here, Senator. You and I have talked a lot about the filibuster. You wrote a book called Filibustered, and I should make sure that I make clear you're not trying to get rid of the filibuster, but the no-effort filibuster, which means a senator, just a single senator, can object to a bill and then debate is stopped. They don't even have to show up on the Senate floor and talk like we've seen in the movies. But what I'm wondering is, you were for that, you were in the majority. I know you've been working on this even when you were in the minority, but now a lot of people see that as the only tool you might have to stand in the way of President Trump's agenda. Are you still for reforming the filibuster?
Oh, absolutely. Because the talking filibuster I'm advocating for says if there is an issue that we think needs more debate, we have to carry on continuous debate. So instead of it being a secret, silent, no-effort veto, it means a debate between the American people. And now, let's take, for example, a national abortion ban. We could carry on that debate for weeks, and you know what would happen is the Republicans would go, we don't want to have this debate in front of the American people. If we could just slam that through like, no effort, boom, done, great. But if Democrats are going to force us to talk about it for weeks in front of America, we know it's a losing issue, and we would win. And so we would have influence and leverage as a minority. We wouldn't have an ultimate veto, but we would be able to bring in the American people and make sure that it's a real conversation about an important issue. So
your vision is like we've seen in the movies, like Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, where you actually have to talk about it in public.
That's right, and it creates an incentive for compromise, because now obstruction, that is delay, is hard because you have to hold on continuous debate. But the majority party doesn't want to have weeks taken up on a bill, and if they're out of sync with America, they definitely don't want to have a debate weeks in front of the American people while people are weighing in and saying, hey, you in the majority, you're bums. You want to be heroes, not bums. So it creates an incentive to compromise.
I think I've seen that Thune still wants to keep the filibuster, so that may be why. So stay tuned on that as you continue to push for that. But I did want to get to presidential betting, because you just told me that I think $3 billion was spent on legally betting on the recent presidential race. You want to ban that. Why? Well,
very simply, if you think about betting on a baseball game, but if the person betting also controls the umpire, then it's corrupt. And that's what we have in a situation where people can bet billions on the presidential campaign, but then through super PACs, anonymously spend massive sums at the last minute to change the outcome of the election. So that's one main reason, because there's a thumb on the scale that says, hey, these elections are no longer fair. The second aspect of this is elections are about electing leaders, not making money, turning them in a place to make money, and that's what's driving all sorts of investments and strategies. Really corrupts the whole idea of democracy, where you're electing individuals to take your state, your community, or the nation forward.
And before we run out of time, I do want to go back to the hedge funds that you mentioned, because you're also pushing for a bill that would ban hedge funds from buying up single-family homes. What's happening, and how much of a problem is it in Oregon?
We're slowly expanding folks understanding this issue. Here in Oregon, 20% of the houses are bought by investors. We will hopefully get a bill passed this coming year that will tell us what type of investors. But in other markets where we have better data, in the Phoenix or Atlanta markets, we know that the hedge funds are buying up 40 to 50% of the single-family houses. And by the end of this decade, it's anticipated that the hedge funds, big, massive, it's where mega millionaires and billionaires put their money, they will own half the rental housing in America. Not only by taking up these, are they driving up the price of homes so that ordinary families, your children cannot afford to buy a house, destroying the dream of home ownership, but they're driving up rents. And that means that so many more families are struggling. And that is exactly the type of hit you in a gut issue that Americans, certainly Oregonians, want us to act on. So I'll be doing all I can to continue that effort.
And you're trying to get the Oregon legislature to pass a bill they introduced last session, I believe, called the Landlord Registry. How would that help?
Yeah, because it means that the point a house is sold, we would know what type of buyer. Is it a corporate? Is it an investor? Is it a corporate investor? That is it a hedge fund? So we could really track the impact. I was out in Eastern Oregon in Baker City, and I said, this may not be an issue here. And people jumped up and said, no, it's an issue here. We've got all cash, no inspection offers of corporations that are buying up our homes to be Airbnbs. They said, no, it's a problem right here, driving up the price here in the far eastern edge of Oregon.
Let me ask you about yourself and your future. You're up for re-election in a couple of years, in 26. Are you committed to running again?
Oh my goodness, can we just recover from this election before we start thinking about the next election? It's something I ponder every 6 years. I've never said it's a given. And so my wife and I, Mary, and I will be pondering the way that we can best serve the community in our country.
Will you be pondering something you pondered right before 2020? You pondered running for president. Does that ever cross your mind?
No, I did explore that possibility. I'll leave that to more charismatic and well-known individuals.
Well, I want to give you about 45 seconds to leave with a final message for Oregonians. What do you want them to know going forward into this next term with Donald Trump?
Our democracy gives us the opportunity to have government by and for the people. There are a lot of forces that are working against that right now, and that includes lawyers, lobbyists, dark money PACs, betting on elections. It's so important that we preserve and re-energize that vision. So when it comes to the cost of housing, the cost of groceries, people getting ripped off on paying 10 times for drugs what people in Canada pay, we can actually deliver for the people. The failure to do so is driving cynicism. Cynicism drives an interest in authoritarianism. We are in danger of losing this opportunity. We've got to make our democracy work better and deliver on the issues people care about.
Senator Merkley, I want to thank you so much for being my guest here on Straight Talk, because it looks like my tenure as a regular host of Straight Talk is going to end at the end of this year. And I want to thank you personally for being my guest over these last 16 years since we started Straight Talk about the same time that you were first elected, that you have provided us with important information, and I want to thank you so much. It has been a real privilege to have you as a guest.
Well, thank you for hosting Straight Talk for 16 years, and I hope they'll continue to be engaged in helping bring us stories that matter for Oregon and for the country. But it's been a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you so much. I'm certainly going to try. But we're not done yet. Join me next week when my guest is Portland Mayor-elect Keith Wilson. We'll see you next week for Straight Talk.